bracket your prejudices, bracket your own biases so that you may allow the text to come out and speak for itself in a very scientific way. Now, another author says, can you really do that? Can you really bracket and become very purely objective in your reading of the text? Okay? Okay, let's jump. Okay. Can you really do that? According to Hans George Gadamer, no. You cannot stand out of your tradition. You cannot, bracket your prejudices because the prejudices that you have actually have roles, okay, in your own interpretation and understanding of the text itself. Okay? So, according to Hans George Gadamer, we can only understand precisely from the perspective of where we are in terms of our tradition. Okay? Every time you read the text, we always are wearing our lenses. Okay? Lenses. If you don't wear your lens, you will not be able to read anything. Okay? And your lenses is equivalent to your tradition. It is what will enable you to understand the meaning of the text. Do you understand? Okay. So if your lenses is color green, you see everything green. So you have a green vision, you have a green mind. I hope you don't have a green. Okay, you have a green blood. So everything is green for you because you are very much, in a way, colored by that particular horizon. Okay, and so for him, what becomes very important in understanding the meaning of the text is not abandon your tradition or abandon your prejudice, but become aware, okay, of the tradition from where you are located, from where you're coming. Be aware of the lenses that you wear in your own reading of the text, because you bring that horizon and allow that horizon to fuse with the horizon of the text. Do you understand? So, according to him, interpretation means fusion of the horizon, okay, of one world of meanings, okay, in a way fused with another world of meanings. In that case, our world and the world of the text. Do you understand? Okay? And when you allow such fusion, that is when understanding happens. Okay, he claims that what becomes very important for one is to be able to appreciate what is in front of the text. What is in front of the text? What is in front of the text is, for example, you're reading a text. What is in front of the text? Ah, Randy, what is in front of the text? Victor, what is in front of the text?
Sure, Father.
Huh?
One who's
For example,
reading the text.
the one who is reading the text is the one in front of the text. Do you understand? Okay? The reader. Okay? And so, according to Dahmer, what becomes most important is for you to be able to understand who is in front of the text, what is his prejudice, what are his traditions that he is able to bring in and allow to fuse with the world of the text. You understand? And that's when interpretation happens. Okay? Is that clear? So you're able to get into an understanding when you do that. Now, the fusion of horizon is not only about the fusion of our world with the world of the text. The fusion of horizon also happens within the context of a community that reads. For example, when RC reads the text and interprets the text this way, because he comes from his own experiences, comes from own tradition, and may have a new shade of meaning to what he actually finds in the text. And I read the text coming from my own horizon and from my own meaning, okay, which may be a bit different from how he reads it. Okay, what do we do? We can also have a fusion of our horizon in interpreting the text. And therefore, we need to enter into dialogue. Okay, that the community of readers should be constantly able to dialogue in terms of the meaning of the text. Do you understand? And that you make the text so rich in its meaning. Is that clear? According to Paul Ricoeur, taking off from Hans Georg Gadamer, okay, he says, okay, let's move on. Okay, yeah, see, Hans Georg Gadamer, the horizon is the range of vision that includes everything that can be seen from a particular vantage point. That's from where you are. And your own is situated historical consciousness. You are located in tradition and culture and language which cannot escape. Okay? But according to Paul Ricoeur, he says, okay, there should be two dimensions that have to be taken into serious consideration in the reading and interpretation of the text. First is the whole question about your own. Following Gadamer, he says, we are all located within our particular tradition. Okay? So very important, he says, contrary to the rationalist hermeneutics, which does completely about tradition, okay, they do away with tradition. He says, okay, uh, hermeneutics, for example, which yung mga rationalist hermeneutics treats the Bible as an ordinary, interesting work in the past, like mga literary artists, literary interpreters, etc. But he says that we proceed with the interpretation of the narratives of tradition, considering that the text is sacred. Okay, we are already in a way conditioned by our own thinking that the text itself is sacred. It is a window by which God meaningfully, though not exclusively, reveals himself. So you're coming from that tradition in your own interpretation of the Bible, and you cannot escape that. Okay? So, but on the other hand, so he calls that hermeneutics of faith. As you read the Bible, you already have some fiducial claim. Your perspective, your lenses are already somehow colored by your own tradition, by your own faith. Kaya nga yun ang hermeneutics of faith. But on the other hand, Paul Ricoeur is aware, okay, that if you are going to advance in allowing the text to really manifest what God wants to reveal beyond what you already know in your tradition, you should be able to take on what he would refer to as criticism. Yan yung tinatawag riyan, ideology critic. That even as you are embedded in your tradition, you could actually take a distantiated look at your tradition. Understand what is in front of the text. Saan ka nang gagaling? You have to take an objective, okay, a distantiated view of the reader, of yourself, okay? And then assume what he would refer to as hermeneutics of suspicion. Contrary to the traditionalist and ontological hermeneutics, okay, yung bang interpretation is always within entrapped in your own being, okay, we take a critical posture that allows new ways of interpreting the text in order to bring open hermeneutic and open up, break open hermeneutic enclosures. Kasi tradition may entrap us hermeneutically that we don't see any possibility of new meanings. But ideology critique through hermeneutics of suspicion make us raise critical questions about certain things. You know, Father Danny, especially in his homilies, would always adopt this hermeneutic of suspicion. Okay? He always raised critical questions about the text itself, and it bears new dimensions of meaning. Okay? But again, coming from the horizon of our own particular realities and experiences. Is that clear to you? So when you do this, okay, for Paul Ricoeur, he says that there should be a new sense of revelation that we should be able to experience when we read the text. So, especially when we read the text and understanding the normative dimension of the text for our life in society today. Yeah? What do we do, for example, with Duterte? And you read the text, then you begin to read it from a new perspective and you raise critical questions. Okay? So these are ethical issues that may have to be opened up and addressed from the perspective of the text. But when you look at the text, okay, the text somehow, according to Paul Ricoeur, has to be understood in a symbolic way, which will be followed up by the next hermeneut, set of hermeneutics. Okay? But when you see Paul Ricoeur always in his work, a symbolism of evil, for example, he speaks about symbol as always having um, excess of meaning. You cannot have one-to-one correspondence. This is a word, and this is the meaning. This is the symbol, and this is the meaning. No. When you are actually faced with a beautiful symbol, it may open up you different meanings because there is always an excess of meaning in what you see. For example, if you listen to the music of RC, okay, you see you see this, you interpret it that way. I mean from your own horizon. But I interpret it another way coming from my own horizon because it is so loaded with meaning that it opens up new ways of possibilities. Do you understand? And this is very crucial, especially according to Paul Ricoeur, in how the text has to be broken up in new interpretations of meaning. Because according to Paul Ricoeur, some of the texts of the scriptures have been interpreted in such a way that people get entrapped within their own hermeneutic enclosures. And that, for example, about the blacks, okay? If you read, for example, Uncle Tom's Haven, okay, there will be a particular dialogue between uh, Uncle Tom with another, uh, white person, and the white person would say, "Oh, as it is in the Bible, the blacks are meant to be slaves," etc. And so that kind of perspective somehow is supported by certain interpretations of the Bible. But that is problematic. How do you open the top, etc.? Or Filipinos, for example, our own history had been encoded, and the historians were Españoles, who were actually colonizers, and would describe the Filipinos as like brutes, no? Father, the former rector of UST, Rolando de la Rosa, wrote his dissertation in Leuven. And the title of his dissertation is Limpieza de Sangre, okay, the purity of blood, okay? And he in that particular dissertation, he noted that the way the Españoles painted the Filipinos, okay, is such that they were not allowed to enter the religious orders. Why? Because in their blood, okay, they didn't have capacity for celibacy because they are like brutes, always driven almost immediately to sexual activities whenever they are faced with it. So they are like brutes, they are not capable of celibacy or chastity. So may reading na ganon. O kaya sasabihin, ang mga Filipinos have to look at themselves very negatively and small people. That's why part of our cultural appreciation of ourselves is that we have the smallest fish in the world, Pandakapitmea. We have the smallest deer. We have the smallest monkey. Etc. Everything is smallest because they want us to understand that we are small people and that we don't have to be proud of any of ourselves, of our culture. But you have to break that open. That is an interpretation, historical narration. And according to Paul Ricoeur, actually, he comes up with, in his narrative phenomenological hermeneutics, excuse me for the term, but that's the term he uses, okay? Narrative phenomenological hermeneutics. Interpretation, A, of the text, okay, according to the structure of narrativity. He says that the narrative, that our life somehow is narratively structured. Our life always has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Okay? And he follows that from a very interesting article written by Stephen Kreitz, who says the narrative structure of our life, okay, that he wrote in the early 70s. Okay? And Paul Ricoeur took off from there and says that human life as a text is a nascent story, an activity and a passion and search of a narrative. He calls this prefiguration. Okay? Even before you are able to tell your story, he calls that you are able, there is already a kind of a prefiguration of that story. That is Mimesis 1. Okay? But then he says, the moment one is able to tell the story of his life or the history of his people and begin to reconstitute it, okay? Even, for example, the biblical story, okay? The story of the people of Israel, the story of Jesus, they are all, okay, that's the Jesus of history. And then when you begin to reconstruct that, you come up with a configuration. Okay, this is the narrative telling and constitution of life. It is about emplotment of the many different experiences and incidences into one concordant plot or story. Okay? So the way you're able to narrate your life, nagkakaroon ng saysay. Kaya nga kasaysayan. You know, saysay means meaning. So when you say kasaysayan, what is the meaning, okay, of that narrative that you're able to implot? If, for example, the way you write your autobiography many years back when you were in high school would be completely different in the way you write your own narrative today, isn't it? Your autobiography, because you have a new synthesis. There is a new way and perspective in which you look at your life and your own story and make sense of many different experiences that you've had as a person. You understand? Now, in your writing of your story or in your writing of your history as a people, you can actually construct a very negative plot. For example, when we did a study of the sexual violence against women, okay, the one part of the study is reconstructing the narratives of abused, violated women. And you can see that the way they would implot the story of their lives is very negative. The main plot would speak about their own victimhood. I was victimized by my uh, grandfather. I was victimized or sexually abused by my uncle or by my stepfather. And then you look at your life constantly, and when you tell your story, you implot it in such a way that you consider yourself always as a victim. You understand? And so when they grow up and look at themselves as victims, they say, I'm victimized. And then now many of them would turn out to be prostitutes. Why? Because I'm a victim. I continue to live my life as a victim. This time, as I am victimized, I want to have money out of that victimization. Do you understand? So prostitution is just a coherent trajectory of that plot that they were able to construct in their own consciousness. But they have to make a utilitarian, gains out of that victimhood. Do you understand? But there should be a way to break open that plot, that implantment that has become very negative. But how do you do? In that study that we did here at SBST 5 years, oh, I think it's now 8 years ago, okay? We see that the institutional interventions, a sisters, bringing them to their, and then begin to teach them their faith, the doctrines of Christian life, God's forgiveness, compassion. And then such would begin to be able to make them begin to see that they may not have to be victims, that they may not have to be determined by their past and experiences, but they can look to the future and begin to redefine themselves according to the future that is made open to them by the interventions of those who help them. And then from the future, they begin to have a new insight of reading their past, okay, and redirecting their present. And they begin to have a new reconstitution. And according to Paul Ricoeur, it is mimesis 3, reconfiguration of their story. Their narrative is restructured in a new form of trajectory and new emplotment of their lives that make them open up themselves to new possibilities other than the identity that they have developed in the past based on their own experience of victimization. Is that clear? I think that makes a lot of sense because they're already, now my fear is already almost time. My goodness. Oh my God. Okay, we're ending at 10:15. As I said earlier, I have only a few minutes left to discuss another very important hermeneutical approach. Let me just summarize this. Okay, okay. Taking off from Gadamer, taking off from Paul Ricoeur, these two people that you see in the slides actually, uh, actually, yeah, I was wondering why they were not coming little by little. Now I realize that I have not used the slideshow. But anyway, uh, I think it's better to say it this way. Okay. Um, Raymond Berenger is a biblical theologian at the Catholic University of Leuven. Mary Ellsberg is actually a moral theologian. She died about 3 years ago. Okay, she comes from Loyola uh, School of Theology in Chicago. Okay, and she sat as one of the correctors and one of the panel of reviewers in my defense, my dissertation. Okay, uh, and because I made use of their framework in one part of my dissertation. Okay, so the approach that they actually put forward is normativity of the future, and they speak about the horizon of the future, okay, the eschaton that breaks into the present. Okay, when we speak about the future that they talk about here, they are not referring to the future that Paul Ricoeur talks about, okay, that Heidegger talks about within the ontological temporal structure of being. If you're familiar with Heidegger, okay, you studied Heidegger. Heidegger talks about that we are ontologically structured according to our time. Okay? Kaya nga being and time, di ba? Okay? Ano tawag dito? Sign und Zeit. Okay? That is the celebrated work that he actually published. Okay, according to him, okay, we have our being is constituted by time, past, present, and future. Okay, and he says about the future that in our attempt, not as we are born and thrown into our existence, the Dasein are actually thrown into the world, including language. Okay, we're asked to flourish with others, the myth sign, but the authenticity of the self should come out. Okay, you are thrown in your own existence without your essence yet. Okay, that's why he's an existentialist. Okay, you don't have presupposed metaphysical essences. Okay, but you actually are able to determine who you are. But how do you determine you are in relation to the temporal structure, ontological structure of being? You talk about the future. And but the future that he talks about within that structure is actually the future that I project, that I have control over, that I should be able to realize my own authenticity as a person pursuing that direction. Okay? That I am not conditioned, okay, by the burdens of my own people's expectations about me in the mid sign, but I have to be able to seek out my own authenticity and make myself in a pursuit of my own future that I define for myself. Okay? That is the kind of future that it talks about. It is a future that is part of the ontology of being. Okay? But the future that they speak about here, Beringer and Elsburn, is the future that comes outside the being. Okay? It is a future out there. Do you remember icon and idol? That being out there, the other, okay, is the future that opens up the horizon of the present of my being, contesting my being precisely to change. Do you understand? So it is not part of my own being, but it is another that comes to me, that wakes me up in my own autonomy. That is the heteronomy that opens up my autonomy according to Levinas, okay, that calls me to a greater experience of myself in terms of my responsibility or response to that other. I don't know if I'm clear with you. Okay, and that being, according to him, to Elsbern and Biringer, could be, of course, Levinas would not associate that being with God. Okay, somehow in his Talmudic uh, studies, yes, but it separates his philosophy from that. But anyway, uh, the God we have as a radical other that we cannot define is the one that contests our being, that calls us in our own present horizon, that awakens us in our own reality and changing us and the positioning us in what we have actually defined for who we are and for what we do in our moral life. Okay? And according to Biringer and Ellsberg, when you speak of time that way, the eschatological vision that comes and breaks into the present is not something that one is able to appreciate in a chronological way. The chronos is what we can identify with Ricoeur and what we can identify with Heidegger. But it is not chronos. The future is not chronos. But the future that breaks into the horizon of the present, they refer to as the kairos. There are kairos moments when that future breaks into the horizon of the present, okay, in a kairotic, revelatory way. It's an opportune time that one needs to discern that one is not in control of. Is that clear? Okay, I just, okay. So the future is one that is not projected chronologically in the Heideggerian way, according to the ontological structure of being the Dasein, but one that comes from the other, that erotically breaks open to the present condition. Okay. So here, okay, the basic presupposition in the appreciation of the text, according to Biringer and Elsburn, is that the text, the sacred texts, are not frozen forms of encounters or static semantic containers of the dictated words of God. As if when you need to know the will of God, you go back to the Bible and dig out what you need to discover in terms of revelation, because the Bible contains and codify everything that God revealed. They don't understand it that way. It goes beyond that. The Holy Scriptures actually is understood as a dynamic and symbolic medium of an open, ongoing personal encounter between God and humanity. Wow, that is that is really a very new insight. Okay, that the Bible is a symbolic medium. It is alive. It is not a dead text. It is a medium by which God communicates to His people, even until now. Of course, it does not contradict the idea that in Christ is the fullness of revelation. But even the fullness of revelation cannot be fully understood by humanity. It comes to us gradually, especially precisely because that revelation brings along with this the proclamation of the eschaton, of the future that we do not have full grasp yet. But Jesus was pointing to through his miracles and through his parables. Okay? Great scholars of the Bible, like uh, is this uh, Joaquin Jeremiah is an expert in parable studies, would always point that the parables of Jesus were always pointing to the kingdom of God, to the eschatological vision. But that is something that we cannot fully grasp yet, but gradually understand in the course of our history, in the course of time. And that breaks open up our horizon of meaning today. Okay? So certain elements, okay, in the normativity of the future, first the city of God together with other end time images gives substance to the normativity of the future that makes us discern both its presence and absence in the here and now. So the criteria, the normative is actually the future, the eschatological vision that comes from Jesus. Second, providing us criteria for such needed discernment, the Holy Spirit serves as the sense of continuity, the locus of authority, the eschatological source of renewal, inspiration, and challenge for believers to participate in the building of God's reign of justice, community, peace, and dignity. So the centrality of the Spirit is always there in our own attempt to discern the inbreaking, the chaotic moments of God's revelation in our history. Okay? Especially through movements like the feminist movement, of course, that can be discerned, the ecological movements, environmental, movements, etc. Third, the most important of the virtues associated with the type of eschatological hermeneutics is hope, which keeps our vision open to the transforming call from the future. So it's always driven with the expectations of what will come, open to what God would reveal to us. And then fourth, considering that the future comes to us as an invitation to a shared life and vision at the heart of the participating process of discernment of the Spirit and His revelation is an open disposition to relationality and dialogue. Dialogue becomes very, very important. Okay? But I was asking them, but can you presume that in the dialogue, okay, the voices of those in the audience are being listened to and given attention to? In most cases, no. Of course, Habermas and Carl Otto Appel presume that you can actually talk about ideal speech situation. In the communicative action theory of Habermas, they think that you can actually go and pursue an ideal situation, speech situation. But the reality, according to Enrique Dussel, does not really happen. Of course, the teacher will always pick, like in my case today, right? Or the mayor will always have to have his say, and he makes people just listen to him. So, according to the cell, and that is what I injected here, is the voice of the poor should be given priority, and they should be the one to set the agenda. They should be the one to uh, it should be their own location where the discussion can happen. They should be the one to dictate the mechanics of the dialogue so that they could actually comfortably speak their own interest and their own reality in the process. So that is what happens in the dialogue. Tradition, sensitive to the different voices, specific persons, and communities whom God addressed in different times and contexts. In so doing, we discover ourselves, okay, for ourselves what God is saying to us in and through those words, so that we could take a personal stance as a way of expressing ourselves, either through questions, doubts, objections, or authoritative texts. Okay, this is something very new. And even it almost shocked me when I read this. But it speaks about the reality that the sacred scripture also contains sinful elements, intrinsically oppressive elements. In the text that I asked you to read, there is a long paragraph by a very famous theologian, biblical theologian, who says that in the Bible, you find texts, you know, sitting side by side with each other. One speaks of the great magnanimity of God's compassion and mercy. Yet at the same time, you see Just a few pages away from that, you see God telling people, no, you attack. And then, oh, I will punish them and they will be destroyed. So those, why are there sinful elements in the Bible? Because the Bible is written both by God and humanity. And humans actually are not freed from their own cultural embodiment and cultural influences of their tradition. And that therefore, the Bible would have anti-Semitic, perspectives, anti-women, because it is actually within the patriarchy and all that. So the Bible itself has to be purified. And according to Billinger, it is the future, the eschatological vision of Jesus that somehow becomes the lens by which we can actually interpret the Bible. You understand? Okay? So it is not the past that is most important. It is important. It is not the present, the tradition of the reader that should be given most importance. It is important, but the most important is the eschatological vision of Jesus. Okay? And therefore, the future, seemingly oxymoron concept, the future becomes normative for our social realities and ethical conditions in our time today. Okay, and that's what I was bringing in. Okay, the inbreaking of the other in history that opens up the text, its psychological vision toward a new liberative interpretation comes to us through the epistemic privilege of the other. The fact that the other is marginalized, oppressed, and excluded, their own experience of exclusion and marginalization already points to the reality that something is wrong with the system. And that therefore, because the system is lacking, inadequate, and oppressive, okay, the other that are excluded becomes the epistemic, okay, uh, channel by which God is able to reveal, okay, His will, His future that contests the present system of structure to open it up to new possibilities and development. Okay, so that's what I contributed there. So you talk, therefore, in liberative hermeneutics and ethics, systems of beliefs, values, and practices have to be contested and should be opened up, okay, as a window, as an icon that is always sensitive to the inbreaking of the future in our lives that is channeled through the excluded other. Challenging systems to be transformed, okay, beliefs and values and practices that may have to give way to better social condition. Claro, that is the end of my webinar, of my lecture. This is quite loaded. I think I know, I understand there are a lot of philosophical background that is necessary, okay, but it is important, especially for those who studied philosophy, to connect what we studied in philosophy with our base courses in theology. Okay, is that clear? Do you have any question? Okay, it is already at 10:24. I've exceeded my time. I'm very sorry about that. I think it is important to finish this section. If you would allow to, if you would beg my indulgence, would you want to ask clarificatory question at the moment? We can actually make use of the first 15 minutes next meeting to entertain questions. Okay. But for the meantime, there may be something that you may immediately want to clarify before we break off. That is our lecture today making sense to you?
Yes, Father.
Yes, Father.
In what way? In what way?
Ano,
Yes.
ano lang, because some of my classmates are telling me that if you could be able to record, because I mean that the topics you are discussing is very interesting, and yet very sometimes it's hard for some of our classmates to get. So if next time if you could record, but I will try to fix that, so I will be the one to record it and
Yeah,
upload it
yeah.
for
Yeah, you can do it. You can do it. I don't know how you do it,
uh,
but the problem is, yeah, I don't want to do it with my, because I'm already, my computer is just moving very, very slowly now. Because I think if you record it and you keep it for some time, it occupies so much space.
Okay. Thank you, Father. That's it.
Yeah. But there should be a way for you to record it. I don't
Y-
know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just Father. You will be the one to allow me to record. I
Yeah.
think somewhere,
That's
but
right.
we'll fix that one out next time, Father.
Yeah, yeah. But I don't know how to do that, how to share. I'm not a tech savvy,
Okay.
so maybe somebody should assist me on doing that.
Thanks,
Okay,
Father.
to share hosting
Yeah.
that you serve as a co-host so that you can record it. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
But I would just like to make you understand that what you studied in philosophy is very, very important in your own theological engagements. Okay. So I'm very sorry that some may not be able to follow that, but you have the text I gave you to be able to read through and that you can follow clearly about the texts. Okay? What I have actually been talking about are all written in the texts. Okay? So if there are no more questions, are you saying that we should be able to end this with the